Thanks, Kimberly. As Kimberly said, hi, I'm Emily Eston. I'm the product manager for integrations here at ORCID. And part of my work is sharing updates on new features related to ORCID and the ORCID registry. So I'm really excited today to share information about Researcher Connect, one of our latest features. So part of my work at ORCID is talking with researchers and members on feedback of things where there are gaps between making their ORCID work most effectively for everyone. So one of the things that we all know is that researchers and members want to use ORCID and connect with ORCID. So researchers use ORCID for efficiency. They want to be able to enter their data once and then have it flow out into all the other systems that they can connect with. They also want their ORCID ID to work effectively for them. So they're looking for suggestions and automations on where to connect, how to get more information and more data into their ORCID record. But one of the challenges that researchers have is that they don't always know that there are resources available to help them. It's not always obvious what systems they can use their ORCID ID with and what kind of data is most important or most effective for being able to have that flow to other systems. On the other side, members want to use ORCID to stay up to date with their researchers' outputs and improve discoverability of their contributions. And institutions and researchers are the authority on researcher data like affiliations. But we know that ORCID integration campaigns can be a lot of work. It requires one or multiple people reaching out regularly to researchers, ensuring that they have conversations about the values of ORCID, being able to connect to their institutional systems. And it can be difficult to do that multiple times over and over, especially in research institutions that work around an academic year and there are new people all the time. So as I mentioned, one of the most important pieces of information that research institutions or research organizations can add to ORCID records are validated affiliations. And now these are important for two different purposes, mainly for trust and integrity in general. Now, for researchers, a validated affiliation is really important for establishing professional credibility, ensuring accurate attribution of their research on their record and into the papers that they connect their ORCID record to, and improving the discoverability of their works with the association of their institution. And I've included this quote from Jason Partridge, who's the collections support senior manager at the Bodleian Libraries at the University of Oxford, that this verified link with the institution, the validated affiliation, gives a feeling that it makes it official and tracks as part of the CV element that the ORCID record offers a user. Now, validated affiliations are also really important for trust and integrity, and I've shared two different examples of what this looks like on an ORCID record. When a member adds an affiliation to an ORCID record, that's what we refer to as a validated affiliation. That means that information has been shared by that member, and it adds this green check mark so that we know that information can be trusted from that member. And that they are responsible for the data that's included. So in these two examples, we can see they've added information about the start date, what the role of the person or the researcher is, more information about that institution, and then what kind of affiliation this person has with the institution. In these cases, they're both employment. Now, affiliations can be added to ORCID records in three different ways. So the first is directly by the record holder or the researcher in the user interface. That's what we refer to as a self-asserted affiliation. And then there are two ways to add validated affiliations, which comes directly from a member organization. So the first is via the member API, which we'll talk about today. And the third is by the affiliation manager, which is another way that we have for members that want to add affiliations. So Researcher Connect is using that second example of using the member API. And what it does is we're prompting affiliated but unconnected researchers to visit the institutional systems that are relevant to them. And so I'll unpack this a little bit more. So Researcher Connect is a feature that has 4 steps. So the first step is identification. So ORCID uses the institutional email domains for an institution to find unconnected researchers that have a verified domain on their record. The second is a notification step. So these researchers receive a notification from ORCID inviting them to connect with your institution. The third is a connection. So within the notification that has this invite to connect with the institution, there's a link to an institutional ORCID landing page that a member would create that explains about ORCID and has the opportunity to sign in and authorize a connection within an institutional system. And the fourth step is a follow-up. So if the researcher doesn't connect on step 3, they'll receive a reminder 30 days later that this option is still available to them. Now I'll go through each of these steps individually to provide a little bit more background. So first, ORCID uses verified institutional domains to identify researchers. So this is a feature that we introduced a few years ago, where researchers can add their institutional emails to their ORCID record and add not an entire affiliation, but it shows that they have some kind of association with that institution. So here we can see on this example, there's a trust marker in the verified email domain next to orcid.org, which means this researcher has an orcid.org email. So when Researcher Connect is enabled, ORCID identifies any researcher that has a relevant email domain for that institution, and that has not linked their record to their integration. So they don't have a connection to the integration, but they do have some kind of affiliation according to us. And we also identify any researcher that hasn't received a Researcher Connect notification within the last year. So if they've already received a researcher notification for this integration, they won't receive another one. So once we've identified all the researchers that are eligible to receive this notification, we send a notification inviting them to connect. And you can see an example on the screen of what this looks like. This text is the same for every member that enables Researcher Connect. So it's going to include a researcher link to the institutional ORCID page that I'll go over in a minute. It contains the member's name, and it also includes that this might not be eligible for all users using the integration. We just know that there is a verified email domain and they might have that relationship. Now, this notification appears immediately in the ORCID registry once we've sent it, but there are other ways that the researcher might receive this notification as well. So first, if the researcher is logged into ORCID and they're looking at their record, so maybe they're going to make changes, if they've received a Researcher Connect notification, it's going to appear directly on their record that they're looking at. So you can see here for an example, this is University of Oxford wants to add information to your ORCID record. So this would be an example of a Researcher Connect notification, and it's appearing directly on their record to make it really visible and highlight that this notification has been sent to them. Similarly, ORCID also will send an email notification. Now, some researchers have opted into email notifications, and they might be sent daily, weekly, monthly, or quarterly. Not all researchers receive them by email, but we do know that some researchers have had this, have enabled this as well, and they'll receive an email notification with any notifications that they've received, and then it would include the text that you saw below again. So once a researcher has received that notification, they've read through the text, there is that connect or go visit the landing page button at the bottom, they'll be directed to a landing page that we ask a member to create. Now we have a couple pieces of guidance for what that landing page looks like. First, it has to be a public page that anyone can access without login. And that's because when we send this information, when we send this notification to researchers, the researchers may no longer have access to your institution. They might be faculty, they might be staff, but they also might be students or alumni or previous faculty. So this gives them an opportunity to go look at a public page with information about how the member is using ORCID. We know that not all integrations can support everyone or all types of researchers at an institution, so we ask that this landing page includes some information about which type of researchers can further connect to the integration. And then we really recommend having some kind of prominent link or button to connect ORCID to the institutional account, right? We want to make this as easy as possible for the researcher to click through and finish connecting to your integration so that they can add that added affiliation or any other information that your integration can write. And now I'll show a few examples of what a landing page could look like. This guidance isn't meant to be restrictive. It's meant to be really helpful, both so that you know what kind of information is there. And we also know that this is the most important piece. The more effective that your landing page is in communicating to a researcher how to get through the next step, the more likely researchers are going to click through and get connected. So this first example comes from the University of Oxford and their institutional ORCID landing page. So what we like about this page is that it has really clear instructions on how to register for an ORCID ID or how to connect to the system. It's divided into different things. And that a researcher can click through on any of these links and get to where they need to get to in order to connect. The second example from the Imperial College of London, Here you can see an example of a really large button that directs researchers to the home system. I will say that landing pages that have a button that looks like this are much more effective in getting researchers to connect through because they know exactly where to look. What I also like about this example is that it has for staff only. So a researcher comes to this page, depending on what their role is at the institution, whether or not they can connect. Here they can see, am I a staff member? Great, I can continue connecting through here. So they have that eligibility information. They also have an explanation for users of the benefits of having an ORCID ID and how Imperial College London is using ORCID in their CRIS system or their research information management system. And the third example I'll provide is from the University of Vienna and their institutional ORCID page. So what I like about this page is that it again has clear instructions for connecting to the home system. In this case, they only have 2 steps. 1, log into the research information system, and then 2, link your profile with ORCID. I also like that they have an explanation here for users about how they're using ORCID data within their system. So we see here this question of what are the advantages, what are your rights, what does ORCID membership mean at the University of Vienna? And then I also like here that they have a box for contact information for any questions or assistance. So if a researcher comes to this page, they don't know if they want to connect to their research information system or use this integration, and they want to know who they should be talking to, they could go directly to the university and have that conversation. So once the researcher has landed on the landing page, they've read a little bit more about the integration, what steps that they need to take. They'll follow any institutional instructions to connect and add affiliations. And then once they've done that, the researcher's record can be updated with the validated affiliation. That integration might also add additional items depending on how it's configured, but at the very minimum, it needs to have a validated affiliation added. And we can see here, there's an example from the University of Oxford, and we see that trust marker with the University of Oxford, so that we know that this is a validated affiliation that the member has added. So let's say a researcher has received that notification, they go to that landing page, but maybe they're in the middle of something else, they had some questions, they didn't have time to do it. No worries, we track that they didn't connect, and what we'll do is send them a reminder 30 days later, the same information, letting them know that they're still eligible for, or they should still check out the landing page and see if that they can connect. And this cycle repeats annually. So they'll receive 2 notifications per year, an initial one, and then 30 days after, until either the researcher connects or removes the verified email domain from their record that's triggering these notifications. What we'll note is that a researcher can continue to have that verified email domain on their record without connecting to the integration. They'll just continue to receive researcher connect notifications. So now that we've gone through the workflow of Researcher Connect, we'll talk a little bit about what happens once you've enabled it or where to track the information relevant to Researcher Connect. So we ran a pilot last year from July through November with 7 institutions to enable Researcher Connect and see the effectiveness of this. So during that time, over 5,000 users connected and added affiliations to their record. What we noticed was that all of the pilot members saw a significant increase in newly connected ORCID records for last year when the pilot was active. And for almost all of those institutions, that first month when they enabled Researcher Connect and were sending the bulk of their notifications, they saw a huge increase in the newly connected ORCID records for that month. I'll also note that Researcher Connect helped small and large institutions alike. So some of these institutions were much smaller, some of them were much larger. They all saw that big increase, and they were all really excited about being able to have that easy way to connect with researchers. And the other thing I'll note is that they activated this pilot last year in various months. Because they've still enabled Researcher Connect and it's still going, they still continue to send notifications without having to think about it. So anytime a researcher has added their verified email domain in the meantime, they've automatically received a notification about connecting to these integrations. So members can track Researcher Connect metrics within the member portal. So if you log into the member portal and you select the member report from the tools dropdown, you'll be able to see information about both how you're currently doing and what kinds of things you'll be able to track once you've enabled Researcher Connect. So this first one is validated affiliation progress. So we have this graph, and it shows a conversion rate of how many researchers are in ORCID with a verified email domain for your institution. How many of those have connected to your integration within this second column? And this third column is how many of those have a validated affiliation. So in this case, we can see for a lot of researchers that have a record with a verified email domain, about 33% of them have connected to the integration, and about 94% of those have also added a validated affiliation for the institution for the record. So member reports also includes metrics on the notifications that are being sent and their successful conversions to adding an affiliation. So we have two graphs related to this. So in this first one, we have monthly notifications. So this is the number of notifications sent over time to those affiliated but unconnected records. So here we can see an example where 1 month there were a lot of notifications being sent, there weren't a lot, then we see another large spike, and then we continue to see smaller spikes over here, or smaller columns over here of notifications being sent. And then similar to the validated affiliation conversion rate, we have one for notification conversions. So in this first column, you'll see the number of notified users overall, then the number of those notified users that then signed in and connected to the integration. And then in this third column, the number of those that have connected to the integration and had a validated affiliation, so followed through the entire process of Researcher Connect. And these reports are visible regardless of whether you've added Researcher Connect or not. But if you have enabled Researcher Connect, they'll obviously be populated with information relevant. So now that we've talked about the workflow for Researcher Connect once it's enabled, and then some of the different ways to track the information relevant to how Researcher Connect is performing, I want to talk about what you can do to take next steps in activating Researcher Connect. So the first thing to check is that Researcher Connect can be enabled for any member that is adding affiliations via an ORCID integration. So you should check if you have an active ORCID integration, whether or not you're adding affiliations. Many research information systems have built-in integrations that qualify for Researcher Connect. So if you're using a system with one of the logos that you see here on the left, you likely are able to add affiliations via these systems, but you might need to turn on functionality to make sure that affiliations are being added. You might also have an in-house built integration that can add affiliations. So you're certainly not limited to the ones that are here on the screen. We also have our ORCID certified service provider program that can recommend different research information systems that have this built-in integration if you're looking for a system that has this type of integration that can add an affiliation. So if you are looking to enable Researcher Connect, there are 3 requirements that we ask for. So the first is an affiliation integration. So this is an active ORCID integration that's capable of adding and updating affiliations. So if you have that integration, you can let us know. The second is an email domain, so a list of institutional email domains that you want to target. This is for that verified email domain that we're looking for. Any email domains associated with your institution that we can send these to. Now, you can target this if your institution, for example, has subdomains for different types of researchers at your institution. For example, if you have student.university.edu versus faculty.university.edu as your email domain, you could choose to just send that to faculty, or you could choose just to send that to students, depending on the way that your integration is configured. And then third is that ORCID landing page. So that's that public web page that explains any of the benefits and provides a link to your integration. You probably already have some landing page with this kind of information. So it's just updating this to include any kind of information that you would want to make sure a researcher who receives this notification should know. And we're happy to provide any feedback as you put that together. So as you're thinking about updating and adding Researcher Connect, we have a couple different resources for you to look into. So the first is we have a blog post that talks about the pilot in full, some of the things that we realized, and some of the information about how we have continued to build on the feature or what kind of things to consider in mind. The second is a Researcher Connect documentation. So that walks you through the workflow and the member reporting that we've discussed earlier today. We also have a link to our brand guidelines. So as you're putting together that landing page and you're looking for any resources about ORCID or how to talk about ORCID there, you can review our guidelines. And then we have the separate information about member reporting. So if you're looking for more information on the graphs that I shared here, or more information about the kinds of reporting that we share regarding our integration, regarding your integration in general, we've included that link as well. And then thank you very much. I'm really excited to hear more about your thoughts related to Researcher Connect and what kinds of things are either advantages or disadvantages at your institution for adding affiliations.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Emily, for such an informative presentation. While folks are gathering their thoughts, I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll to see what you all took away from that and what you're thinking for your next steps. I see a couple of hands raised. If possible, could you please submit your questions via the Q&A? The first question I'm seeing is there's a question if there's going to be a certificate provided for online participants. We will provide in the follow-up email with the recording and materials a confirmation of attendance, not necessarily a certificate for this session. Our first question for you, Emily, is can the initial registration also be done via the connect button? And is the institution automatically linked?
Sorry, do you mind repeating the question? It broke up a little bit.
Sure. Hotel internet isn't always the most reliable, so let's try that again. The question is, can the initial registration also be done via the connect button? And is the institution automatically linked?
So via the connect button that we include within the notification.
I would assume.
Sure. So if you want to have that notification go out to any researchers who already have an ORCID record, but they aren't connected to your integration and your integration requires some kind of registration, we recommend that that connect button goes to the landing page first so that they have the context, and you can include that kind of information there.
Good to know. Thank you. I was taking a look at the poll results from our opener poll, and someone noted in the question, what's the number one thing you hope Researcher Connect can automate or solve? They said, we've added all ORCIDs to Pure, but not everyone has validated the link. We would like an automated way to do this. Is there a way Researcher Connect or anything on our side we can do to help with that, or any advice you would provide?
Yeah, so what Researcher Connect is going to do here is that we will send notifications to anyone who hasn't already connected. And ideally, if they are in Pure, what's going to happen is that they'll receive this notification, they'll go to connect their account they'll go to connect their ORCID record to your Pure instance and be able to complete that check. So this actually is helping you get part of the way there. What we're able to do is we're sending this to everyone, so we don't necessarily know who you have in Pure or who you've already added this information, but we do know who hasn't connected. So this is helping you get part of the way there.
Awesome. Thanks, Emily. Taking a look at the results from the poll that we just launched before the Q&A, it's awesome to see there's quite a few people indicated that they have all the information they need about Researcher Connect and they are ready to roll with it. There are some who are indicating that they still have a few fundamental questions before they move forward. Please, this is your time. Submit the questions and we'll do what we can to help you get all the information you need. And then I think there's a really important question here that someone has submitted. And thank you for your honesty. They're just saying, I'm unsure what an ORCID integration actually is. Emily, could you explain, like we're five, what an ORCID integration is and what it does for our members?
Sure. So an ORCID integration can look like a lot of different things, but essentially it's using the ORCID API to, at the very least, link between an ORCID record and some kind of person identifier within a system. So a lot of times, systems will use an ORCID integration to verify that a researcher has an ORCID ID, and they'll use that information to say, great, I know this is a person, I know they've created an account with ORCID, and I can see information about their academic history or different things that they participated in. Depending on the way that an ORCID integration is configured, it can do additional things. So at the very least, it can authenticate with ORCID, so we know that person has an ORCID record, which is usually a sign that they are a researcher, they are interested in being able to connect and share information with other institutions. That second step is reading data. So ORCID records can have lots of information, including affiliations, works, service, membership, information like verified email domains. And if you have an ORCID integration, it can read that information. And then the third step is being able to write back. So if you are a member and you have access to an ORCID integration, you may be able to then write that information back to ORCID or write additional information back to ORCID that you can verify. So in the case of a research institution, that's usually an affiliation. When a publisher is a member, that might be writing publisher information, so different works that that researcher has done. So an ORCID integration is some kind of connection between your system or database and the ORCID system for reading, authenticating, and sharing information.
Great, thank you. That's very helpful for us to help understand what exactly an integration is. And I want to acknowledge Paloma from our Associate Director of Engagement is on the call as well. And Paloma, is your team available to help if anyone needs assistance or some guidance when it comes to integrations?
Absolutely. So it doesn't matter if that's a simple integration or a more complex one for member integration together also with the consortium leads. So if you are also part of a consortium, we are more than happy to help with the workflow, understanding when and how it is best to connect with ORCID, and also solving questions, for example, about the landing page that Emily was presenting in order for you to be able to activate Researcher Connect if you wish to do so.
Excellent, thank you. We've got a couple of questions now relating to Affiliation Manager. So firstly, how does Researcher Connect compare with Affiliation Manager, and what are the benefits of each approach?
Should
Do
I,
you want to start that?
Emily? These are different things. So the Affiliation Manager is an additional tool we offer that requires no technical configuration at all and helps you if you don't have a system that is able to add affiliations to ORCID records. Or, for example, if you have a certain community you would like to add affiliation to, for example, a working group or a certain panel. However, the Researcher Connect works on top of an existing integration. In the majority of cases, that is going to be an integration with a CRIS system, because in the majority of cases, academic institutions stored information about affiliations also in their CRIS system or research information management system. So the Researcher Connect is a functionality that acts as a layer, so to say, on top of an existing integration. And the Affiliation Manager is a tool that you can use, as mentioned, if your system doesn't support affiliations, or for some reason you feel more comfortable using a different approach. For example, you feel more comfortable managing start and end dates not via the CRIS system, but via the Affiliation Manager. And the workflow with the Affiliation Manager is about a CSV file, and we have several materials there also for you to check, and also our support if you have some questions about that and about its implementation.
Great, thank you, Paloma. And to follow up on that, someone is saying, we haven't started linking accounts yet, so which makes more sense? The notification via Affiliation Manager or the notification via Researcher Connect?
So I think this depends on how you have that information and how you want to share it. So if you have an existing research information system, like one of the ones that we shared before, and you want to be able to have researchers connect to that system, then we would recommend Researcher Connect. If you don't have a system like that, or you have a pool of researchers that you want to add the affiliations directly, then we would recommend using Affiliation Manager, which sort of works in the opposite direction of how Researcher Connect works.
Excellent. And then another follow-up question, and probably something just for clarity. Um, is Affiliation Manager better for catching people who haven't yet registered for an ORCID?
That's a very good question. One thing that can be helpful indeed with the affiliation manager is that the person receives the notification on their email, and it doesn't matter if they have already an ORCID ID or not. So that notification can prompt them to create an ORCID ID and then accept the connection with the affiliation manager, and therefore having then the validated affiliation added as well. So that's beneficial. It doesn't have to be the only approach. So an institution can work with researchers to create an ORCID ID separately and then have the researcher connect notification. So both approaches work, and as mentioned, this can vary from one institution to another, and these are the type of things we support you with.
Excellent. Very helpful. Moving over to something. Oh, actually, there's another question about affiliation managers, so I want to get to that one while we're still on that topic. We have connected the majority of our faculty via affiliation manager. Does it make sense to add Researcher Connect to tap into the remaining faculty, or is it redundant?
I personally wouldn't say it is redundant because at the end, as mentioned, it points to different systems. So with Researcher Connect, you're going to help your researcher connect with a CRIS system or a custom integration you have at your institution adding affiliations. If you don't have that yet and you're using the affiliation manager, then the affiliation manager is a fantastic approach. So this is not to have one competing with the other. It is basically a way to complement. So when the integrations at an institution are a bit more complex and they are more add more data, then Researcher Connect is a fantastic option. And the affiliation manager is another tool that can be used for that purpose.
Great, thank you. And then just for a little more clarity, is Affiliation Manager still only available to the members of consortia?
That's correct.
And is Researcher Connect limited to consortia members or all members?
Everybody.
So Researcher Connect is available to everybody.
Awesome, that's good to know. I'm not seeing any more questions about Affiliation Manager. So switching gears a little bit, this next question is about AI, and love to hear both of your perspectives on it. Though Paloma, I know you have quite an interest in AI, so it'd be great to hear what you think. Do you see ORCID becoming a central digital identity infrastructure for AI-driven research ecosystems in the future?
That's a very difficult question, and I'm not sure if that's on scope precisely for this webinar. The only thing I can say is that part of our strategy for the coming 4 years is understanding more about AI and how we can play or not a role in that ecosystem. And I would recommend everybody to read an article that was written by the Australian Access Federation precisely on the role of persistent identifiers in the AI-driven research ecosystem to guarantee provenance, trust, and integrity. And I think that can also provide an overview of what's ORCID's role in that conversation.
For sure. And I think what ORCID does with or without AI in context is, especially by using Affiliation Manager or by using Researcher Connect, is you're adding trust to researchers' records, which is you can't overstate the importance of that. So with or without AI, that is one of our bigger contributions to the research ecosystem. Our next question, unless Emily, did you have anything to add there?
No, I think you summarized it well.
Great. Our next question is, how can small universities with limited technical resources implement Research Connect effectively?
So one of the things that we wanted to emphasize with Researcher Connect is that there's no additional technical work that has to happen. So if you already have some kind of integration that can add affiliations, the only additional thing that you have to do here is create that landing page. And it's supposed to be something that's easy for you to maintain, easy for whoever the ORCID contact is, and really emphasizing having that landing page being the place that includes any of the information related to ORCID that you might want to do, right? So who the contact person is at the institution, that link to the system that you want to connect with. And that way it's able to streamline the resources that you do have.
Excellent. Thank you. That's very helpful. Our next question is, how can validated ORCID affiliations support research integrity and reduce metadata fragmentation across databases like Scopus and Crossref?
Sure. So I have a couple examples here. I spend a lot of time talking with publishers, and one of the first things that they look for when they have any authors connect their ORCID record to their databases is that they're actually looking for affiliations. It helps them know that this is a person, they have some idea of where this person is connected to, and that that affiliation is validated so that they know that this researcher is who they say they are and they are connected to the institution that they're connected with. And that's able for them to know both this researcher as a person and being able to validate any information down the line of being able to go back to that institution and say, this is this person, they've submitted to us, that sort of thing. What's also helpful from an institutional perspective is that the institution gets to write the affiliation with the exact kind of information that they want. So how is this person's role written at the institution? How do they want the name of the institution spread? And then as it moves into other databases, that information is written exactly as how the institution wants it to be. So this way, researchers aren't writing departments in different ways. They aren't writing the university or the research institution's name in a different way. In this case, the member writing a validated affiliation, and then that information being pulled in or pushed into other systems allows it to be defined the way that the member would like it to.
Excellent. That's very helpful. Yes, Paloma, the link that you mentioned from AAF, could you share that with me and I'll be sure to share it in the follow-up email?
Absolutely, I can.
Excellent. Thank you. Switching gears a bit to one of the questions that we got at registration, though we do have plenty of time for questions, so please keep submitting them via the Q&A. If Researcher Connect relies on institutional email domains to find scholars, how do we handle situations like alumni, retired staff, or even visitors who still have active email addresses but shouldn't have current employment affiliations pushed to their ORCID records?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's definitely a lot of feedback that we've received from folks. So we know that every integration is set up a little differently. Some integrations can have all of those categories connect to their institution. Some of those are very limited in which kinds of researchers can connect. And so this notification does go out to anybody with that verified email domain. What we recommend is including that information on the landing page explicitly of who can connect, because what will often happen is if a researcher can't find that information, they might try to go through and connect to your institution already, and then receive some kind of error. They're not able to do it. So the other thing we recommend, in addition to having information about who is eligible for connecting to your integration, is who they should contact if they run into a problem. They might contact us, but they're more likely to contact you at your institution. And so having someone who is able to say who can connect or how they can't. We don't at this time have any researchers remove their verified email domain. That's still an option to them, but they might choose to remove it themselves if they don't, or if they aren't able to connect.
Very helpful. Thank you. I noticed quite a few, excuse me, notes in the poll about for their next steps, they'll be looking at updating their web page, talking to marketing about updating the ORCID land page. So my question is, the notification directs researchers to an institutional landing page. If our current ORCID landing page is just basic text informational page, can you remind us what are the absolute must-have elements we need to add to ensure that a researcher actually clicks authorize instead of bouncing?
Yeah, so the first thing is making sure that there is a really visible link to the database or your research information system or whatever you're trying to connect to. Um, this can be just a really prominent link. We really recommend it as a button because people like buttons and people like to click on them. We also recommend that that page has some kind of ORCID branding on it so they know that they've ended up on the right page from the notification. And then we also recommend including any information about who is eligible to connect. I'll say that really good institutions, really good examples of landing pages include any additional steps that they might need to do. So, for example, if they go through that connection, but there's an additional thing that they have to do or an additional button that they have to click once they're inside their profile and actually linking their ORCID record, including that on that page. So it's there for the researcher to find and follow, or if someone reaches out to you with questions, you can send that to them directly. Yeah, those would be the primary things to include on that page.
Excellent. And you're right, people do love a good button. And I'm just going to share another quick link in the chat. Last week, I had a webinar with our web producer, Rob Blackburn, and he gives a lot of information about how ensuring your website and your web pages are accessible for all. And we kind of talk about that. So perhaps while you're thinking about this landing page, check out this webinar to ensure that it's accessible for all. And you've got a nice button that works for everyone. Looking at our next question, this one's about Pure. We have already linked Pure to ORCID, but only send institution name to ORCID. Could we add department data without getting everyone who has already authorized the link in Pure to reauthorize?
So the short answer is yes. If you are already writing validated affiliations to ORCID records and you want to update those records or you want to update them with additional information, you already have asked your researchers to authorize that permission to write an update. And so you should be able to add that department data directly to any of the researchers who still have that authorization.
Good to know. Always love it when the answer is yes. The next question, again about Researcher Connect, is email notification via the domain ID necessary, or is the link on the website sufficient?
So I think if I'm understanding this question correctly, and feel free to clarify. So we do need a domain ID to be able to send the notifications. And we send all the email and the internal notifications to the researchers. But we will only link to a landing page. We won't link to your integration directly. So that link should go to the website, and it'll go to anybody who receives that email domain, anybody who has that email domain.
Good to know. Good to know. Also in the polls, I noticed a lot of folks saying that, they're ready, but they need to talk to the research office. They need to loop in someone within their research and provost office. The question is, I need to pitch activating this to our research office director and provost. Beyond saving the library time, do you have any high impact metrics or the best selling point from the pilot data that can be used to demonstrate how Researcher Connect impacts the university's global ranking or tracking of research outputs?
So I'll say the most successful of these Researcher Connect most successful institutions that have enabled Researcher Connect saw over 30% of their notifications convert into connected researchers with a validated affiliation in their systems. I would say on average, about 15% of them are added. So this is getting a consistent number of researchers into your system so that you're able to read and write information to their ORCID records and declare that. And I think that's a pretty important stat to share. I think the other thing in terms of saving time is that if you turn this on now, you don't have to do anything else. It continues to happen and continues to go on. So if you're thinking about, well, we're getting to the end of the academic year, researchers might not respond. Think about when you have researchers joining in July or joining in September as the academic year gets started. They go in, they add their verified email domain because they've needed to use ORCID for something else. They will automatically receive this notification as well. And so it's not only saving time, it's thinking about all the researchers who will continue to add their verified email domains to ORCID and get ready to connect. And that's something you can run along any other campaign that you're doing. It's both assisting you and helping you think about the future and all the future researchers that are coming to your institution.
Good to know. And I know lots of folks mentioned both at registration and in the polls that they are really looking to reduce that manual work that they need to do. Our next question, when we're talking about turning the feature on, is I'm an ORCID member, but where does this live? How do I turn it on? You know, is it something our IT team needs to configure in Member Portal, or is it just somewhere I just click the button to turn it on?
Yeah, so if you are a consortium member, you should reach out to your consortia lead with this information, and they can help you review that landing page, make sure that's information, and they'll get in contact with us. If you're a direct member, you should get in contact with your ORCID contact that you want to enable Researcher Connect, and we'll help you walk through that process. It's something that we have to turn on for you.
So it's definitely good to reach out to your ORCID contact, whether that's your consortia lead or, you know, your direct ORCID contact.
Right.
Can we talk a little bit more about notifications? We've got the notification cadence down. Is it possible for institutions to customize the messaging so that their researchers know that it's a trusted request from their institution?
So at this time, we are not able to customize the notification. It's going to be the same for any institution that wants to do that. It does include your institution's name, and it will include your institution's landing page link. We recommend that any additional information should be on that landing page. So if you want to customize how you want to talk about what this Researcher Connect process is doing or what that's going, it can happen there. The reason that we don't make it custom is that we're sending this to a lot of researchers at a lot of different institutions. And so we want to make it as straightforward as possible, understanding that researchers might see the same kind of message from other institutions depending on how they've had their verified email domains configured.
Would you recommend there be any sort of pre-communication to researchers to let them know to expect this is coming?
I think it's certainly helpful if you want to do that because this goes out to, yeah, this will go out to your community. And so ideally, it's connecting some of those researchers that you don't already have in your system, don't have their ORCID records in your system that you want to connect. So if you are going to turn on Researcher Connect and you want to let them know in advance, I think that is helpful.
Good to know. We do still have about 10 minutes for questions, so encourage anyone if you've got any lingering questions or last minute thoughts that we could help you move on to the next step of getting Researcher Connect turned on for you, please feel free to submit them. When we're looking at the reports and reporting that can come out of turning on Researcher Connect, can library staff use Researcher Connect to see a breakdown of where data gaps are? Like, for instance, tracking which specific departments have the lowest connection rates so they can target their outreach?
So that is information that you're able to see within your member report of where what organizations and affiliations you've written, and you're able to pull that kind of information and see those numbers, and you can use that information to infer which departments are less connected.
Good to know. Good to know. I've got 2 questions remaining, but again, still time if anyone wants to submit another question. Can we talk a little bit more about how, you know, researchers often use varied acronyms or non-standard department names on their papers? Does Researcher Connect ensure that these non-traditional or varied affiliations are more standardized correctly back to a main institutional record?
So that is one of the things that we're helping here, or we hope that we can help with here. So when you're writing a validated affiliation, you get to decide exactly how the institution, how the role, how the department is listed. And then as that researcher goes and connects to another organization or system that uses ORCID, for example, a publisher, that publisher can then read the ORCID record and see that validated affiliation and include that as part of the submission. So this does help standardize in that publishers know to look for this validated affiliation information in order to standardize that on their system.
Very helpful. Thank you. So our last question for now is kind of just a general ORCID question, and it goes back to, the whole reason why ORCID came to be. But can you guys talk a little bit about how can ORCID help reduce author ambiguity for researchers with multilingual names or different translations of their names?
Sure. So we totally recognize that researchers might use different names throughout their career, depending on the venues that they're publishing in, depending on how their name changes over time, and especially with transliteration or using different languages to write their name. And so we offer the ability to have I don't know that we call it a primary name, but you can have multiple names on your ORCID record, including one that you would highlight in the header, and then ones that you might include below that, so that researchers and other systems that are looking at your ORCID record can see the variety of different names. And what the ORCID record and having an ORCID ID allows you to do is that ID is connected to you as a researcher, and all the different facets of your career, all those different names can be connected in one space. It's really for that author disambiguation and being able to address this problem that you've submitted of this name can look really different depending on the situations that you're in.
Excellent. Very, very helpful. Not seeing any other questions. I do want to thank both Emily and Paloma for their time today. And Emily, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe prior to this session, you all reached out to those who registered and had the ability to turn this feature on. Is that correct?
So we have reached out to all members that we know are currently eligible for Researcher Connect. That is, they are currently adding affiliations and they would be eligible. We're also going to be in touch with organizations that are using systems that could be adding affiliations to let them know that if they turn that on, they would be eligible for Researcher Connect. But certainly, if you have turned on or you started adding affiliations since we've rolled out Researcher Connect, you might not be on our list, so things might have changed.
Excellent. And one final time, can you remind folks how they can learn, one, if they're eligible, and two, get this feature turned on if so?
Sure. So if you're not sure if you're eligible, I recommend looking at your member report to see if you've been adding affiliations or checking the integration system that you're using. And then two, I would get in touch with your ORCID contact and they'll be able to help you either figure out how to do that or help you turn on Researcher Connect.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Thank you to Emily for such an informative presentation today. And thank you, Paloma, for your assistance throughout the Q&A.
Thank you.
I want to thank everyone for joining us today and hope to see you all at the next webinar. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you.